So think about this in two structures. All right, China, you've got obviously a one China policy, put mainland China, then you've got Taiwan, right? Don't want to make this, I don't want to dive deep into controversy, so we'll just leave it at that. Two separate governments. They were the opposition, in the early days between the nationalists who got, basically ejected out of power at the end of World War II, and the Mao Zedong movement, who basically reestablished domestic control over or domestic governance, and pushed out the foreign influence with the help of other foreign powers at the end of, as part of World War II, and also leading into the aftermath of World War II. My point there, you've got what's basically universally recognized as the government of China, the CCP, right? One China views Taiwan, China itself, as the same thing, right? However, most other countries also recognize Taiwan, some sense that they have a government up in the air. It's just one of those, we call it jump balls. It's never actually been settled, and it's just coming up, springing to the forefront again. My point here, when you see Gavin Newsom is representing the state of California, which is subject to the senior authority of the U.S. federal government, right? Which is from the executive branch, run out of Washington, D.C., the White House, et cetera. My point here, you've got, call it a vassal state, right? Or subjected government to the senior authority in the U.S. You've got Gavin Newsom going to the CCP to work with the senior authority, or what's widely viewed as the senior authority government in China. And then from Canada's perspective, I think a lot of us still view Canada as an independent country. My interpretation, they're actually not. The head of government is still technically the British Crown. There are certain offices there that actually report whether the Crown is directly represented. So in my sense, also, you've got another subject state government represented by Mark Carney visiting the CCP to enter into some deal, right? Build momentum. What I just said was probably controversial. Many people will disagree, but let's just let it go. Take that for what it is. You've got two, let's call them second tier in terms of sovereign authority leaders, ultimate authority leaders from the West, traveling to CCP to lock in some sort of agreement, some sort of ties to build a new power coalition headed into Davos for the big game that was going to take place a few days later, right? So you start from there. All right. Now, on the other side, if you're the senior authority in the US, how do you respond to that? We know what's going on here at this point. It's a story about standing up for nation state level sovereignty at the end of the day, right? Is what this what the Trump movement all boils down to. I think at this point, and also this is just getting into personal opinion at this with this statement, but I don't think this is just a movement like a single lone man authoritarian type of movement. There is a much deeper bench of leadership here at both political leaders, political talent, business talent, just what have you. This is a much bigger movement behind it than just one figure, which is, I think, what the competing Western power factions are, I would say, missing, but I think they get it at this point. And that's probably highly worrying, or causing
I
them a
think,
lot of
yeah,
worry
just
from
having
their
Carney go out
perspective.
and do this, that's a clear sign, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so how, if you're the other competing Western power faction, which is made up of, just call them the sovereigntists, right? You would include the Trump camp inside the United States. You do have a movement for this. They're in Europe, but they hold no power, right? We're talking, Marine Le Pen's party, AFD, et cetera. You can even say
Maloney.
Georgia Maloney is one of these, or an example of one of these. They just don't hold any vehicles of power per se, except for you could say Maloney in that case is definitely holding some of the keys to power. But in Northern Europe, I would say would be the caveat. They're not, the institutionalists have not lost any ground at this, or given up any ground to this movement within their little North Sea, Baltic Sea, et cetera, sphere. So if you're the the counter movement here represented by Trump, and I would include Taiwan in this as well. Also Japan, and we'll get into that in a second, under the Takaichi prime ministership that came through last fall. All right, what do you do if you're Trump? Same time, Trump and Taiwan announced a basically step up deal for the onshoring of semiconductor supply chains. We talked about TSMC Arizona, that chips fabrication development that has been underway for multiple years now. It's now producing live chips. We saw a step up in that the prior relationship with a new deal announced. So TSMC, part of the bullets here, TSMC announced it's going to expand its just fabrication centers or facilities within Arizona. I think, Cameron, I don't have the exact number here, but I think they said they're going to up it to 5. So we're going to have 5 chip fabs in Arizona.
Yep.
I saw another headline. This is just on technological prowess and achievement of those centers, but I believe they announced, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that the first 2 nanometer chips had been produced from those facilities.
That's
Double
right.
check me on that.
Yep.
But in terms of actual capacity, I know TSM's fabs in Taiwan itself are kind of known as the state of the art. The kind of the ramp up of the curve of capabilities within Arizona, it's showing demonstrated progress and achievement. Secondary, that was not a part of these deals that started coming out in the news in the past week. You also saw $250 billion of credit guarantees from TSM, HQ in Taiwan for these, facilities. So that's helping out the banks, helping out the U.S. Capital base to actually fund the infrastructure build out. And then you saw another $250 billion in investment from Taiwan capital itself committed to the supply chain, onshoring build out itself. Some other bullets I probably missed there, but that was the counter development to what we saw from the headlines out of Mark Carney, Gavin Newsom, as everybody kind of positioned to go into the big game that was Davos here. We're just keep going with the sports analogy. All right, and then the last thing there, Sunday morning after the TSM thing, news item hit, after all the Carney and Newsom handshake photo ops with Xi were done, pushed to X, Instagram, Twitter, etc. Sunday morning, you got the announcement from Takaichi that Japan was going to hold snap elections, right? She just came to power like 3-4 months ago. Remember the golf clubs photo, Shinzo Abe's golf clubs gift to Trump we went over. So what this actually represents. So to come to power, the Japan's LDP, which has basically been the holder of the reins to Japanese political power since World War II, and the negotiated surrender, all of that. LDP has no longer been in a position where it has the majority of parliamentary seats and electoral support to achieve majority control all on its own. So it's had to go out and build a coalition government.
Yep.
It hasn't had to be like you've seen some of the European democracies. They've had to just form some really crazy multi-party coalitions to get, or basically to prevent what they term the far right, to achieve or like coming to power, right? In Japan, prior coalition before Takaichi, the junior partner with the LDP was this minor party called Komeito, which, if you look into it, what they really represent is a high degree of influence with the mainland China, CCP rulership. And what they're all about is basically appeasement. Further business integrations with China, don't rock the boat. Basically, don't stand up for sovereignty or Japan's sovereignty against CCP influence is how I would describe it. So it's very tied to the hip once you start digging. Komeito representation within Japan to like a CCP friendly perspective and approach. We'll just leave it at that. With Takaichi coming to power, the junior partner was flipped, right? So it's bye bye Komeito, hello Japan Innovation Party. And if you look into this Japan Innovation Party, with the way they describe themselves on their own website, it's like sovereignty first. Like I forget the exact quote. I don't have. I'm not at my desk, so I didn't have the show notes here.
Lead with what they
But
mean, though. Literally,
yeah, they
sovereignty.
they wear they wear it right on their sleeve, right? Okay, and so if you look at the headlines that Takaichi has, made for herself in the last 2 to 3 months since coming to power, it's been primarily around the notion of Japan standing up for its own interest in the case that mainland China acted upon Taiwan, right, to further encircle it, whatever, bring it into that mainland authority structure. That ticked off the Chinese. They've responded over the last several weeks with measures that would go through, like, that would coordinate through just traditional economic and financial means, namely not purchasing Japanese fish exports from its sector. And this was, as I understand, like a key harvest season. Did impact Japanese fishing industry pretty significantly. They've encouraged Chinese tourists not to travel to Japan,
Right.
citing safety reasons. And they also engaged in what have been considered the most significant war games exercises, with like basically an encirclement or blockade of Taiwan itself.
Right.
When I say Taiwan, they would consider it China. Um, so there's been a step up here. It's getting heated. So the response to that Sunday morning, Takaichi says, we're going to hold a snap election. And basically what she's expecting is to shore up her coalition, both LDP and Japan Innovation Parties, seats in their parliamentary body, which will give her more control, basically more political
Right.
power. That's where I think we've set the stage with everything, Cameron, to go into what we saw happen at Davos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So with the Davos piece, I'm really curious from your perspective, Matt. You've done a lot to set this all up, kind of just for me at least, and for sure for the viewers. Can you outline kind of the two factions, or the maybe more factions in your mind, and then go on and explain kind of what's going on there?
yeah, okay, so the factions in the West, there's two who are jockeying for control and are in a tug of war. And I'd say there's others who matter, who are still kind of on the sidelines. But eventually, as we talked about with the Fed last week, they're pulled onto a side in the tug of war. Everybody and everything is going to have to pick, right? You can't play the man in the middle, try to play both sides. Eventually you're going to have to, like, because ultimately someone wins the tug of war, and all of the people involved in the Game of Thrones want to preserve their position, have a seat at the table in whatever uh, side emerges and gets to govern and whatever lies ahead. Everybody's eventually going to take a side once it becomes crystal clear who's going to win, or maybe you do get convinced to join the losing side if you're promised something in particular, say a larger share of the spoils, something like this. Is just how political horse trading works.
Right.
Um, all right, but the key sides involved. So I think it's pretty obvious at this point. Whoever Gavin Newsom is lined up with is totally not simpatico with everybody who Washington, D.C. sent to Davos this week. So from the Trump administration, you saw him travel with what I'd say is kind of an abnormally large contingency of representation within his cabinet itself. You had Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. There's probably others as well that I'm missing. It was a big group. My point is, um, I think if you're reading, tea leaves, why would you signal that? I think like this goes back to the idea that hey, no kings. If we just kind of stand, resist this guy, we wait him out. This force of nature personality, which is Donald Trump, which I think it's getting inarguable to deny that this guy is kind of a really big personality. If no one's,
Right.
if you haven't come to that conclusion yet, right? Like, there's a reason he had his own prime
Reality
time
show. Yeah.
reality show. Exactly. Like this guy has main character energy if there ever was one. Um, you go there with a large contingent to say, oh no, there's actually a very deep bench behind this. This is a fire at this point after 10, 15 years. This movement has momentum. This is a fire that's not going to be quick and easy to put out. I think that's what he was really showing with this large contingency who all individually held up on their own. And talk about like individual sound bites or key bullet points from Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, etc. But you could almost just do this whole analysis and just focus on them and talk hours about how they stole the show by themselves
Yeah.
at Davos. All right, so you got clearly Trump, all of those figures in one power faction. Takaichi would be in support. You would also list the actual government of Taiwan itself. You would include industry representation from the tech and semiconductor standpoint with TSM. If you look into the family ties as well, like CEOs in the American semiconductor industry, Jensen Huang, et cetera, they are Taiwanese by descent.
Yeah.
They have siblings, right? The CEO of
AMD.
AMD,
Yeah.
like they're all part of the family, and it's getting very clear at this point. Those side chains, the semiconductor industry, they're part of this sovereigntist faction. Um, I mean, it's a business; they're going to have to do what they do to self-preserve, but they're lining up on that side if you're not noticing with that
Right.
TSM deal. Who would we see on the opposing side? Mark Carney, Gavin Newsom. You would line up, basically when you see Gavin Newsom go into Davos and like to tee everything up. He does this kind of snap interview where he's just frustratedly calling for whoever he can elicit some response from in speaking into the void. Um, he calls for people to stand up, stand tall, all the empty euphemisms, right, against Donald Trump and what was being pushed for in this case, the big one is Greenland, and what we haven't even gotten to that after discussing it last week. But think about who he's soliciting responses from. You could say the European institutionalist Christine Lagarde, Ursula von der Leyen, just go through the list there. That's kind of the group you would see. Basically, everyone whose self-interest is to preserve the legacy institutional structures. Why do they do that? Well, bless you. If they disappear, that's they no longer have a role in the new direction the West is going. Um, so that's very loosely how I would divide them up. I want to leave it to the audience to kind of fill in the blanks and line these people up on their own without me introducing too much bias into the process. But um, the way I've grouped the camps, number one, call them the old school Atlanticists, call it Anglo financial interests, what have you. I think I've listed enough here where you can, fill in the blanks yourself or come to your own conclusions. And then on the other side of that, you've got the sovereigntists, right? And at this point, it's way beyond just Trump. It's a big tent. Now, on the sidelines, you've got other parties like, say, the military or the security industry, all of that, and that itself is not a monolith. But you've got parts of the military who are aligning with, the sovereigntists, and then you've got some holdouts who may or may not choose to align with the old security infrastructure, which is largely driven by NATO leadership.